Good evening. It's Robin Wilt and
this is Reverend Myra Brown. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you this evening. We're talking politics again.
My favorite subject.
Yeah, so of course this past year was significant in terms of what we accomplished in Monroe County for the first time, establishing 6 majority Black districts.
Yes.
And
historic.
This is historic. And this is the first election season in which the voting power of Black people are actually going to be expressed in those majority Black districts. So we have that proportional potential for representation, but I don't think we have Black candidates running in all of those Black districts, so that's something that we're going to have to continue to try to work on. But as you can see, we have a tableau of a bunch of election mailers.
Yes, and they're still coming.
They're still coming. I think most of these were received by you, Reverend Myra. There are a bunch of races. This is, of course, a local election year, so we are talking city court, Monroe County court, family court in particular. We're talking town races. Of course, I'm in Brighton, so that race is near and dear to my heart. And of course, the county legislature races, where again we're contesting those Black districts. So let's start with county leg, shall we?
Shall we? Yes, we shall.
Yeah, so, the thing is, if you have been engaged in this discussion about majority Black districts, I think you're familiar with who was fighting for those majority Black districts, and obviously, President of the county legislature, Sabrina Lamar, she was particularly crucial to obtaining those majority Black districts. She is in a primary against a legislative aide, I think, or constituent services representative for Senator Jeremy Cooney, Rose Bonick. And so the talking points there are extremely troubling, and I think that's going to be the gist of this conversation, just trying to parse the language that is being used in this election season, because it's particularly targeted, particularly personalized, and so let's talk about that race. It's because one of the big discussions that's one of the themes that seems to carry through is who is a Democrat and who is not a Democrat.
Yeah. Honestly, Robin, I'm not swayed a lot by the narrations that those running for office kind of put on their placards. I mean, and there's so many.
Yeah.
As this table is kind of full, I think what moves me is the actions, right? The political leaders who show up for their community, who show up for the people. And I don't think anybody has done that to the degree that Sabrina Lamar has. If it were not for Sabrina, we would not have 6 Black majority voting districts. We would not have somebody kind of keeping an eye on the equity and a lens that is so needed in our county and in that chamber. We would not have had someone who is so brilliantly strategized. I think Sabrina might be the only Black woman in America who could bring Republicans to the table to vote for what's in the interest of Democrats. Like, I don't know any Democrat that's been able to do that, but she was able to do that. And so I don't know how opponents are trying to color her, but it's the wrong color.
Right.
Because I really, really enjoyed and gained just a ton of respect for Sabrina's ability to navigate as a Democrat the county legislature. And, and I remember the fight, that we were fighting our own party members, other than Sabrina and Rachel Barnhart.
Yeah.
There were no Democrats in the county ledge that were willing to support these black majority voting districts. They were not willing to free the black vote. And I worked, extensively making phone calls and jumping on Zooms. I even brought in black pastors to
building
try
a coalition around this issue.
Getting, to talk to legislators of color at the time who still refused to support these 6 black and at the time even the 5 black majority voting districts. And so I find it very strange that when it comes to election time, that these politicians are writing a different story. At the very least, I need them to be honest.
Right.
And I grew up that you give credit where credit is due. And so I just don't trust any narrative that's trying to paint Sabrina Lamar anything other than a superhero for the black community because she's done a tremendous job, and I have the utmost respect for her. She will absolutely get my vote.
Right, and it's not just with the majority black districts that she really took an issue that was very much community oriented and brought the right over in support of that issue, because the issue of indigent burial rights, that was a huge issue. Monroe County, like a lot of neighboring counties and actually across the region in Syracuse and Buffalo, we saw reparations for indigent burials. They were at hundreds of dollars. We're talking like $250 to $450, which is a mere fraction of what it actually costs to bury somebody. And imagine having somebody's, your loved one's life taken through gun violence, and then having to navigate that system, and you're given this paltry amount that isn't going to begin to cover the costs of burial. And Sabrina really championed that issue, and now those indigent burial stipends are in order of magnitude more. And they're still not enough, but looking at $2,500 as opposed to a couple $100 means a lot.
It makes a huge difference. I was not aware of that, and so that's amazing. That's another amazing thing that Sabrina has done. But I that sort of the indigent burial situation has certainly touched my life. I had a friend a couple of years ago who was here, relocated to Rochester. Was kind of isolated from her family, fell ill, and she did pass away. Did not have a next of kin that they could find locally, and the county buried her without, notifying the family or not being able to reach the family. And I tried; it was hard to reach the family. Well, what we discovered was, at the end of it, is that all of her next of kin relatives had died. Her father was dead. Her mother had died. Her siblings were dead. And it was way after I learned that the county had buried her that I reached out and found a cousin in New York City and an aunt in New York City, and they were the next of kin, and so it was really helpful to me to be able to connect them to the coroner's department and for them to be able to at least find out where my friend was buried, because she was buried as an indigent, right? And so it was heartbreaking for them because they were looking for her and nobody knew about them, and So it's those indigent burials are really important, to not only make sure you have the resources to bury people who don't have the resources, but to also be given some time to look for family or friends, who could give them a proper goodbye. So I really appreciate that Sabrina led the charge on increasing the resources for that.
Right. So, again, we talked about some of the narratives that are being disseminated in these races, and obviously you and I were both in that struggle to get the 6 majority Black districts, and we know who was standing with us and who was not. So it's really curious to be receiving mailings now that kind of rewrites that history. We have certain county legislators who are saying that they championed that issue when they were really on the other side.
That's right.
It's very disappointing, very disappointing. I don't know if we want to name those, but I would pay particular attention to LD 29 and really know the history there, know who was there standing up for 6 majority Black districts and who would really stand with the members of the community and uphold their voting rights as opposed to who is just saying that now.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say it again, when we fought for the 6 Black majority voting districts to free the Black vote, the only 2 legislators that were Democratic legislators that were in support of that and worked alongside of us in coalition was Rachel Barnhart and Sabrina Lamar. That was it. There's not a long list there. So anybody else who's claiming to have led that charge or done anything around it, they're just being dishonest. And, I won't vote for dishonest people running for office. And so, I know the truth. I was there.
Right.
And I'm going to go with the truth.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go with, narratives that people make up because they're running for political office.
Exactly. Just know who you're voting for. And then another theme that I see in mailers is community safety. A lot of people say public safety. I like to talk about it in terms of community safety because really we keep us safe and if we are given the resources to keep us safe. And through resources, I am talking about recreation dollars, education dollars, like the things that, quite frankly, make a suburban community like Brighton, different in terms of the resources available to the community when compared to the city of Rochester. And we in Brighton have seen some troubling mailers funded by an independent expenditure committee, or super PAC as they're called, that kind of hearken to community safety. We've seen these in county ledge and citywide races as well, because there are certain people who think that the only way that we can keep the community safe is to continue to fund the police at disproportionate rates. I reject that narrative. I think that, the way you fund community safety is putting money in the hands of those who need it.
I totally agree with that. I mean, safety is about how we take care of each other.
Yeah.
Not how we come after each other.
Right.
Not how we divest in each other. Not how we neglect each other. Not how we use power over each other. And I think those models of safety are outdated models.
Yeah.
You know, I saw a mailer with like an attack dog on it, right, as this symbol for safety. And you know, as a Black woman and as a pastor, I see that and I think of all the attack dogs, right, that were let go on protesters protesting for civil rights and human rights, Black protesters who were protesting in the 60s for civil rights. And so it's kind of disgusting to me that this image of these attack dogs have come back into the political arena to somehow court voters with this sort of underlying racist trope of this is what it means for public safety. That's not what it means for public safety for me and people who look like me. That's not what it means.
No.
And so, again, I have very little trust for those kinds of images being used. I think it's just as important the image that you use as the words that one uses. And, you know, because I think it says a lot about how thoughtful people are, how aware they are, how conscientious they are, and really how trustworthy and perhaps even safe that they are. You know, I would not want to project this image of a snarling, growling, vicious attack dog as a way to say to voters, come vote for me, I'm going to get them. That is, in 2023, that should not be our message. We should not be doing that, right? We know that there are other models of public safety, just as during the 2020 protests, right? When I put forth the model of the elders, right, it was a different model than this sort of attack dog model that RPD was using at the time to stop a community from grieving. And at the end of the day, our new model worked. It changed the trajectory of the protests, right? We modeled that we can have public safety and peace through something other than aggression and monitoring and control and the use of power and the misuse of power. And so I think the same thing in this election series, you know, this election season, that I think we need, you know, thought leaders, people who understand, you know, the broader availability of models for public safety, and that they actually show some courage to invest in those models, to try those new models, and really push back against those old models. You know, we're not in the wild, wild west.
Exactly.
You know, it's not about shoot 'em up, bang 'em up, you know, and then everybody can go to sleep and feel safe. We need to get resources to people. We need to get relationship to people and build relationships with people. You know, I can go into, you know, some of the worst, or at least the perceived worst parts of neighborhoods in our city and be completely safe. But it's because I go into those communities building relationship. Go into those communities with a spirit of care for the people. I want to hear what they need, and I want to advocate for them, and I want to journey with them. You know, it's not hard stuff. Like, we don't have to create mailers, right, that demonize the human
these are
family.
the least served communities, right? You know, Brighton, I can attest, is one of the most well-served communities, right? The resources are there, and the services that we provide on a town level, they benefit the community. They keep the community safe.
Absolutely.
And the notion that we need to come after certain people, to you know, attack people in order to keep us safe is inherently divisive. And you know, I think inflicts fear and trauma on the members of the community toward which that messaging is obviously directed. And so,
if you inflict enough fear and trauma and you back people up against the wall, they are going to come out fighting. I mean, so you kind of create your own problem, really. So I absolutely agree with you. I think that we can decide to better serve a community and help them thrive, or we can decide to divest and withhold the service within those communities and create jobs for ourselves to go get them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think that's kind of the latter model is kind of what we've done. We withhold resources, we withhold opportunities, we make communities desperate enough so that they make really bad decisions, and then we go, aha, gotcha.
Right.
And then we're going to send the law and order after you. We're going to come get you, right? But we're writing that story.
Yeah.
We can unwrite that story.
Exactly.
We can unwrite that story.
We have choices here.
We have choices
here, and I think choosing elected officials and prospective elected officials that are willing to break that cycle of coming after people, attacking people, dividing our communities is the only way that we can implement those models that really embrace everybody in the community and make sure that everybody in the community has that same perceived sense of safety.
I think that's true, but I think we first have to believe that we're all in this together. Right? That we are all one community. And not all political leaders believe that we're all one community.
Yeah.
There are some who actually exploit the idea that we are separate communities.
Yes.
And that we're separate groups of human beings. And we're not. We're all one part of one human family.
Yeah.
And we either go up together or we go down together. Right? And so it really takes a special commitment, to the human condition that people are up against, and to make sure that, that we're using our resources in a way that's really going to give people a hand up and not a foot down.
Right.
I really look forward to the day. I think it's why I love leaders like yourself and, Sabrina Lamar and Candace Lucas and, Damon Meeks and there's so many that are just so special to me because I've seen their leadership and the ways in which they walk with people with a full heart and a full commitment to make our community better and to keep calling people to their best selves. And I think we can do that, the Malik Evans of the world. I mean, I think there are so many of our leaders who have the potential to give us what we need.
Yeah, like you said, it's a choice.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
And, again, you talk about leaders and, when these attack mailers first came out in the town of Brighton, there was a lot of posturing around, these are outsiders in our community, or outside from people outside of our community who are investing in this messaging, and we reject outsiders coming in to influence this election. But when you did some of the research, you found out that there were people within the community that were funding this messaging. And so I think these elections really are about the heart and soul of our communities, and whether we are going to reward the people who would invest in this kind of exclusive, divisive, traumatic, and racist, quite frankly, messaging, or are we going to demonstrate to the purveyors of this hatred the type of community that we actually are, which is, not one that supports racist tropes.
We're certainly at a crossroads, and I think we have to stand in something around this stuff. Our world is divisive enough. It really is, and I think we can have, or we should want to have, the right kind of conversations with each other to put these relics of our racist past away. We don't need them. They are not helpful to us. And, and I think that, we are in a pivotal position to really choose a different path, to do something different, to choose different leaders, to kind of leave that behind us, and really create the kind of society that we really want. And I hope that voters are smarter.
I hope so too.
I do. I hope that they don't get carried away
Right.
with these attack dog images. I hope they don't get carried away with these rewrites of narratives, right?
Yeah.
That people are putting on their mailers, and or that they don't, get wooed by the fact that they got 3 or 4 of them versus,
Right.
versus 1 or 2.
Yeah.
It's always about, the work
Yeah.
that people are doing and the impact that their work is having on a community. And unfortunately, we have people who are, in these races who are just kind of in it for their own self-interest. And it's antithetical, really, to being a politician, because a political leader is supposed to be there to serve others,
Yes.
right? Not to
serve the people.
That's right.
And not beholden to other, quite frankly, selfish political interests. Because the other messaging that I see, there's a lot of endorsements flying around, right? Lots of endorsements, like this influential politician supports this candidate, and I want people to pay really close attention to that, because I see a lot of individual endorsements coming from influential elected officials, and then I see other endorsements that are from groups, right? Working Families Party, and Justice in Action, Eleanor's Legacy, environmental group, whatnot. Some of the people community organizations who have formed coalitions on the ground, coalitions and relationships on the ground, than saying, this is the candidate we support, as opposed to saying, some politicians are like, well, I have all of these connections to powerful politicians, and that's why you should support me. And so, this is another mailer. I didn't get the mailer, but it's like, trusted by the leaders we trust. And I will say that while Brighton does have Black elected officials, none of them are in the leadership that we apparently trust, endorsing these candidates who are part of an all-white male slate, and then getting endorsements from, quite frankly, overwhelmingly white elected officials. And I just think of the omissions there, right? Because there is Assemblymember Jen Lunsford, who again does not even cover this town, but there's no Lexama group. There's no DeMont Meeks. There is no Malik Evans. There is no Stanley Martin. There's no Kim Smith. There's literally not a single Black elected official that is one of the leaders that are supposedly trusted by the people who are sending out this messaging. So the subliminal messaging is very strong there.
Yeah. I don't quite understand this whole endorsement system. I'll have to be honest about that, because I'm not sure that I necessarily believe in it, given the way it's been seated inside of the political process.
Yeah.
That I'm not sure that completely trust that endorsement system.
No, I think the most endorsement,
Yeah.
the most important endorsement is, of course, from the people.
Exactly. That took the words right out of my mouth. Like if the people endorse you and they know the work that you've done and they have benefited from that, they have felt that work, they have, trusted that work. That's the level of endorsement that I think is authentic and real for people. And status endorsements, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not much into those too much
Right.
because I mean it is kind of politics, right? And I'm interested in the wellness of our community.
Yeah.
And I think that that mailers, when they go out, should also reflect the diversity of the communities that they are representing. And so I hear your concern about not having receiving a mailer that doesn't have that doesn't reflect the diversity of the community that they're trying to lead. I think it does a disservice to that community.
Absolutely.
Right? Because
absolutely.
Diversity is a wonderful, wonderful thing. We need it.
Right.
And so we can't whitewash our politics by extracting the diversity out of it.
Yeah.
And then try to tell people that this is going to be good for us.
Right.
It's not going to be good for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned Summer Brooke. I love her. I think she's a great leader as well.
Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely. So, again, I don't want to belabor this, but I do just want to mention that early voting began on June 17th, and it goes through June 25th. Election day is, of course, Tuesday, June 27th.
Yes.
Please do check with the Board of Elections to make sure you know your polling place and have a plan to vote.
Yes.
If you cannot make it to the polls, do contact the Monroe County Democratic Committee. They will be able to offer you a ride to the poll.
I think the Faith Leaders Roundtable is also offering rides. There's a Soul to the Polls campaign. So we want to make sure we get people out to vote. So don't let anything stop you.
Right.
If you need a ride, you call and we will get somebody to get you and get you to the polls.
Yeah. So again, make sure you exercise your right to vote. Too many people have fought, bled, and died for that right, for you to not take it seriously. So be an informed voter. Make sure you know who is going to be on your ballot. You can download a copy of your ballot at the Monroe County Board of Elections website again. But I want to stress to you, this election really does represent a turning point, I think, in our community, because the messaging that is out there about community safety, and we need to, as voters, send a clear message to our elected officials that, these are our values.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So.
That's right. And, and our values are worth fighting for.
Yeah.
These values of community and connection and investment and lifting the economic floor for those who whose floors have holes in them.
Right.
And being able to create a future and carve out a future for people who've lost hope and feel a sense of hopelessness, to remind each other that we're in this together.
We're in this together.
And if we're going to get out of this, we're going to get out of it together. So I hope that everybody who's able will get out to vote, will cast their vote, will cast it wisely. If you don't know who to vote for, ask somebody that you trust.
Right.
Before you get swept away, a table like this.
Right.
With so many mailers that your head is swimming at night. ask somebody that you trust, somebody who's been engaged, somebody who's been involved, somebody who knows the story behind the story.
Yeah.
I have folks in my family who look to me, they'll, Reverend Myra, who should we vote for? And then we have that conversation. Well, I was part of, this fight for our community, and here's who showed up, and here's who didn't show up. Right? And so those conversations are really important to know, who is showing up for you, the voter, when you need them to show up. And so I'm hoping that we get a great slate of progressive candidates this go around, who, and then I think who I will say this piece, the other piece that I think is also important is vote for people who have some emotional intelligence. I have been deeply disappointed by politicians who don't have emotional intelligence, who make everything about them, who personalize it all, who working behind the scenes to punish or to shame this one, or to make fun of that one. And I think those are signs of a lack of emotional intelligence. And I think that we have to also take those folks off the table and off the ballot, so we can get to folks who are, who can bring us some mature ways of engaging, and that aren't taking everything to the chest, and are able to actually have an open door policy for the people who agree with them and the people who don't. Right? Because that's what it means to serve your community. That people aren't going to always agree with you, but it can't be a lifetime sentence of, I'm not going to take your call.
Right.
I'm not going to invite you to a meeting. I'm not going to let you know, what's happening here. I'm going to keep you on the outs. If those are the kinds of leaders that are sending you mailers, skip them when you're voting, when you're pulling the lever. Please do not pull the lever for those folks.
Right. If somebody will not take your call, why should they have your vote?
Absolutely. And that's the heart of democracy. Is to be. I like to have a good banter every now and then myself.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that I don't support the person. But I think sometimes you have to have some banter and some back and forth to get to the right decision for an issue. And so in order to do that, you have to have some levels of maturity in the leaders that you have, who can banter with you, who can toss this issue back and forth, who can hear a perspective that's different than theirs, and still be able to have some clarity based on this new information that they have received, and not all the doubling down that we often see in the community. So I'm hoping that we'll get those kind of people in leadership this election
I wholeheartedly
season.
agree. So again, be informed. Election day, primary election day is June 27th. Again, I can't say that often enough. And early voting is ongoing. It started on June 17th. Will end on Sunday, June 25th. Make sure you have a plan to vote. Make sure you are an informed voter. And make sure that you vote for justice, because justice is what love looks like in public.
Amen.
All right. Thank you so much for being here with me again.
You're so
Reverend
welcome.
Myra.
You're so welcome. My pleasure. Pleasure. It's exciting to think about who will lead us in this next campaign.
Absolutely.
Within our community.
So make sure you're part of this discussion. All right. Good night.